Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, another listener question episode. Thank you for your comments and questions, whether they're through email or YouTube or the podcast or the show, whatever. Enjoy answering your questions. Thanks, sponsors: Topps, Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Hugs the Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. First off, I was on John Newman's podcast, one of his podcasts. He's prolific, and he had me on for about an hour. And sometimes I'll just grab some tidbits, some excerpts, some outtakes. But there really were two things there, and it didn't mount to a whole episode. But we had an enjoyable conversation for an hour about topics of his choice, which he's a plugged-in, interesting guy. Anyway, so the first thing that came up on that was the rumor that I've also heard that GameStop might be acquiring collectors or vice versa, and that they might be moving into a deeper relationship that would involve PSA. Nat Turner's on the GameStop board. It's not a crazy rumor. So John was asking me about that, and basically what I said was, here's how it could happen and why it wouldn't be crazy. GameStop has about $5 billion in the bank from their past money raises. So they would be able to buy cash plus stock, perhaps, collectors, which would include PSA. Now, why would PSA want to do that? If they really want to go public, there's two main ways to go public. One is to go public yourself and go on a road show. I have lots of CEO friends that have done that. It's no fun. It's a gruel. Even when it turns out great, it's wear and tear on the executive team for sure. The simpler way is to be acquired. There's a SPAC alternative as well, but to be acquired by an already public company. My guess is collectors, their financial situation is much stronger than GameStop in terms of earnings and recurring revenue and those kind of things. The two together could make a lot of sense. And what I would do if collectors was bought by GameStop for a bunch of cash and a bunch of stock, then they would actually be the owners of collectors. PSA owners would have liquidity. They might be able to cash out some, and they would be then yoked with GameStop. Then really they could change the name of GameStop to Collectors. Once it's one big company, Collectors, PSA is a very strong brand. But when I read what GameStop is talking about, they're talking about being there for collectors of lots of different things. Okay, that was the first one. So again, a rumor, but that's how I think it could happen. Number two, coming from John Newman's Sports Card Nation, he asked me to put on my predicting hat. He says there's a big four grading companies, and do I think there'll be 5 or 6 or others if we look into the future? And I said, absolutely. I think there very well could be other serious entrants into grading. Grading is very lucrative if it's done right. It's a scale thing. You've got to get enough volume to make it work. There's a ramp up curve for just your ability to do it, as well as the acceptance in the secondary market. So I do believe there'll be additional entrants. And that conversation was brought about by, again, some rumors about SGC and all that. So the status quo in this hobby is the status quo until it's not. And thanks, John, for provoking those questions. Third was from Stukes, talking about how when he would buy collections at a show, if it was 4 or more, they got together at the hotel after the show and did a draft of the cards from that collection that was purchased at the show. My point is, Dukes, that's great. You're braver than I am. I really tried not to have partners. I definitely had partners when I was doing the buying trips and getting out and about and being at a hotel in a strange city. But I also did some by myself. It's good to have a second person there for security. But at a show, I have bought collections with another person, and sometimes it was a friend, but a couple times it was a stranger, where you both found the collection at the same time. Somebody walked up, and it was not clear who he was offering it to, but I said, I'm interested. But then the guy next to me said, I'm interested too. And so rather than getting in a bidding war, we just said, let's just split it. There was enough. And we paid a fair price. But then divvying it up, as we were huddling up, we realized that he had more interest in one of the years, and I had more interest in one of the years. But Stukes, it just takes one picky, overly deliberative guy to mess it up. If you've got a whole bunch of people and they want to make sure they're exactingly dividing the collection, that can take a lot of time. When Rich and I were splitting this collection for a couple of friends, we really wouldn't have done it unless they were going to be pretty agreeable that we were going to make it as close to right as we could without spending a month. Then from Brow Coin, talking about plastic sheets when I mentioned there were so many plastic sheets in that collection and just what's going to happen. We're talking about tariffs and seem like shipping rates keep going up. Supplies seem like they keep going up, but there are innovations with supplies. The tariffs could be a problem there, but there's a lot of supplies already out there. For example, the plastic sheets, there's all kinds of gently used plastic sheets out there, 9 pockets for sure. The hope for shipping is that I think in my lifetime, there'll be drone delivery that will reduce the last mile shipping of getting things to your doorstep. There's going to have to be security, but I think they'll resolve that. It's just too big of a business, the shipping, and there'll be some innovation there. Next from Mookie Chilson, talking about dividing the purchase collections, episode 1378 I did with Rich. We enjoyed doing it, and then I enjoyed laying it out there with the podcast. But he mentions that I said, I don't want to do it again. He thinks the fact that I said I did it, somebody's going to say, you just one more time, do it for me. And he was surprised that Rich's main comment was that he got out in time for lunch. I was willing to do it for free for a friend. And then I asked Rich to help me, and I would have compensated Rich. But the guy said, hey, here's some nice money. That was fine. But how would I have priced it anyway? How would I have charged? If you're the executor of an estate, you can charge by the hour. If you're doing an appraisal, you can charge by the hour, or you can charge a percentage. But if you did a percentage, like 1 or 2%, how would you even take that? That would have been another problem after we divided it. How would we get our 1 or 2%? And frankly, they wouldn't even have done it. We said, we're going to charge for that. So fine. And so they'd still be stuck in limbo. And there are strategies that if somebody asks you to do something, you don't want to do it, you put a high price on it. I did want to do it. So I lowered the price to 0, and Rich thought it was an adventure. And yes, we had a nice lunch, and it was a good day. Not even a half day. And next from Boom Slang, said, I've got a question. In my collection, I've got a 61 Topps baseball, Pinky Higgins. It's got a rubber stamp on the back from a person named Frank Lee, and it has his home address and phone number on the back. Can you tell me about this card? Is stamping cards a thing from the past? Does it add to the value? He said, I can supply a photo. I don't need to look at the photo. That was done occasionally in my neighborhood as well. Not everybody did it, but some people did. When you were flipping or you were doing some communal kind of collecting over at somebody's house, to have your cards from your collection stamped on the back killed the resale value, unless it would be a really famous person. And even then, you could fake that. I could get a rubber stamp for Elvis Presley and stamp the cards. Really, the cards are meant to be collected as they came out. There are some JB cards out there, probably 61 Topps, because I fell prey to that, or maybe 60 Topps. I don't know. I did that a couple of times, and it just didn't feel right to me. Next from MJ's Family Time Cards, talking about my card wall and how are the cards hanging on the wall or in the shelves, specialty racks. Actually, they're leaning back. They're like on an easel on my shelves. If you can see, the mahogany shelves are very nice, and they can be hung on the wall, but I didn't want to drill a bunch of holes in it. This way I can take them on and off. They're static cling connected rather than glued in, so I can remove the slabs and show people the back of the slab. They're also not in direct sunlight, which I think is important. I have minimal windows. In fact, it appropriately is a card cave because there's not a lot of light other than when I turn on the lights. There's 8 cards in a panel, the 2x4 matrix, 12 inches by 16 inches. So very versatile. It'll go on a shelf, it'll go on the wall, and I've been very pleased with that. Next, same person, MJ Family Time Cards. Organized value box are really desirable. Various prices in different sports add additional time digging. It's nice to find a box which has one price and organized by sport. Yeah, ideally, each box is one sport and one price. Then you can make really quick work. However, if it's multi-sport box with still one price, say everything's $1, but they're multi-sport, that actually works for me. And it works for me actually better because it's a turnoff to so many people that are only looking for basketball or only looking for baseball. The fact that I love all cards, so I will look through anything. Now, if it's Pokemon, I pass through that, and some of the other non-sport I don't really dig, but I'll go super fast through those. If it's multi-priced, all bets are off. If it's a quarter card next to a $5 card, next to a $1 card. Now, some people really like that because they're looking for things that are mispriced, but I have to go really slow. Plus, I don't know how to negotiate a package deal in advance because they don't know what cards you're going to pull. They think, oh, if I give you a good deal, you're going to just pull out the best ones. Yes, I'm going to pull out the best ones, but if they're $5 cards or quarter cards, you may give me 10% off on a $5 card and 30% off on a quarter card. Just tell me what the deal is. Next from ACD 1994. talking about today's modern hobby, that he was a collector in the mid-90s. Was he happier then? Was it simpler then? Was it better then? Happiness is hard to define because it can be circumstantial. I just think I'm at a card show. I'm looking through cards. I'm with my buddies. I'm having a great time. I may have a sore ankle or something, but I'm still in a good place and enjoying that. The cards are more expensive for sure, but the other aspect of happiness is, and I think ACD 1994, you got into this, and if you're associating with people you like, you're sitting next to somebody that's a jerk, that's maybe not going to be very much fun, even if you love the cards. But thankfully, there's not very many jerks in this hobby. It's mostly people you would like. And I do, but again, I'd like to have more collectors chasing more cards as long as that's in some kind of sense of equilibrium. I don't want less collectors, and I don't really want less cards. I want an appropriate number of cards that collectors can chase to where pricing can be reasonably stable. Next from Larry Gitlin about the show bidding in the master auctions. And he was saying he was bidding on something at the last minute. The lots that he was interested in were pulled, saying questionable authenticity. That is a sneaky way to do it. I agree, Larry. That's not fair. But if you get a question of authenticity, even the slightest question, and the card or the piece of memorabilia is going for a low price, there are auctioneers that did that. And it's not right. If it's legitimate, that's one thing, but he'd already bought similar things and they were real. So again, if it's too much of a bargain, the auctioneer, if they're dishonest, they make more money if things sell for more. And then lastly, from Justin Matthews, he sent in on my pod page, the website. He said, I'm wondering if there's a good place to read a little bit more about Dr. Beckett. Actually, Justin, I'm reading this. Justin said, I've recently found the podcast, been listening to episodes, got me curious about his background. That's my background, how he, that's me, got into sports collectibles, publishing, etc. I got great news for you, Justin. You're on your way. The bad news is I have decided not to write a book. I've got lots of books that have my name on it, but a narrative book about my story, I have chosen to do the podcast route. And I'm not saying you got to listen to all 1,000+ episodes, but if you look, there are episode descriptions as well as titling that might suggest whatever you want to find out about. Some of them are set reviews, some of them are Rich and I rambling, but you just don't know. Some of the things in there, if you weave it together, there's a lot of tales, true tales of the way it was from when I was a kid to when I was a major dealer to when I was an author and publisher. Now I'm a retired CEO that enjoys working the dollar boxes. So the narrative there is in the podcast. You'd have to jump around a little bit, but I've enjoyed doing them. And I don't know that I could give you the order because it does jump around, but just select a few and put them on 1.5 speed and dig into it. Like I said, I'm not going to write a book. I'd still be working on chapter 1 if I was doing a book, and I'm into more than 1,000 podcasts. That's been a better way for me to do it. But thanks for the kind words, Justin, and everybody else. And I will be back again in a couple days with another episode.